So, switch on the video, and this is the second in our Mayor of Ron Lady Shiur series going into Tisha. I wrote a book. Incidentally, I meant to bring the book, which is for this series, and I did. I just brought the wrong book. This book is my latest book, and it's called Never Alone, the book for teens and young adults who've lost a parent. And looking around here, don't be offended, but you don't fit the category of teens. So we can, unless you know somebody that would help, I will try. Sorry, your inner child, yes.
Yeah, it would have been good.
Your inner teen.
Would have been good a while ago.
Yeah, a little time ago. Yeah, okay. I wrote a book once. I've mentioned to you before. It's called The Little Book for Big Worries, dealing with serious illness, and the book, obviously semi-autobiographical in nature, my late wife having been seriously ill, etc. But the book starts off with a true story which I once heard about some rabbi, I can't remember who the rabbi was, some tzaddik, who used to give a very bizarre blessing to couples at their wedding. And the blessing was, you should have a life full of worries. Now, I don't know if that makes any sense to you, and it didn't make sense to me immediately, but what he meant was, if you've got a life full of worries, there'll be little worries. You know, the baby's just soiled his diaper and we've run out of diapers, or, you know, the booking you had for the flight, you can't get that one, it's got to be 6 hours later. It's annoying, but it's a little worry. Or, if you're me, the dentist, trips to the, yes, I can move. Or trips to the dentist, which I'm not at all happy to do. Big coward when it comes to dentists. Once attacked a non-Jew who was attacking a Jew in Manchester with a knife. That was okay, but dentists, no, that scares me to bits. So basically, what he meant was that if you've got a life full of worries, there'll be little worries, and you won't have any big worry. And we don't want any big worries. So little worries you can go over. Big worry, that's a separate thing. So I think I set some of you a hard task last week. I said, if you remember, this is the formula for regaining a relationship with somebody you've lost it. I have to tell you, somebody already, just before the shiur started, told me I did it and it worked. So there you are, as I promised, 95% success rate in rebuilding relationships, but here's already an example. So it was a challenge, but I think I was premature in offering you the challenge. I think I needed to give this shiur first before I gave that shiur. So this is the shiur. This shiur is called Forgiving the Unforgivable. Forgiving the Unforgivable. Because when it comes to relationships, the one I talked about last week was when you can't even remember what you fell out about. So common that families fall to bits, and sisters fall out with sisters, and brothers with brothers, and even fathers and mothers with children, and they can't even remember what it was all about. Mothers-in-law always can, but they can't remember what it was all about, which is tragic. But these, sadly, little things grow to something big. I wanted to talk today about big offences. A little bit for big worries. This will be really not a parallel of that. So this will be a shiur on big offences. Things that are really, really big. So let me tell you a true story. Many years ago, I used to work for a famous girls' seminary here in Yerushalayim called Neve Yerushalayim, which I'm sure you must all be familiar with. And my job and task, along with my partner in the south, which was called Rabbi Danny Kirsch in London, we worked for Orsamech and Neve, was to recruit young men and young women who might be suitable for both fabulous institutions. And one day I got a phone call from a mother who told me that her daughter was very interested in going to Neve Yerushalayim. Now this was, of course, manna in my wilderness, as they say in English. This is great because the more girls I sent to Neve, the more my prestige, stock, and longevity as an employee was guaranteed. And so I arranged to meet them in my office at Manchester University If I remember right, it was a Wednesday morning, I think 11 o'clock, don't know why I remember that. And I was a bit late, which is very untypical for me. I'm a Yekisha Litvak, and I'm always on time, and I'm British. We are never late. Anyway, so basically I turned up to the office, and there was the mother sitting there with the daughter. And when I walked into the office, I was struck by the appearance of the mother. Now, this bit is going to sound strange. I want to emphasize that I am an Orthodox rabbi, but it was impossible not to notice that the mother, I would say early 40s, was an astonishingly beautiful woman. Now, I quickly add that the Gemara in Megillah discusses the 3 most beautiful women in history, so we're not exactly, we don't ignore the fact that women are beautiful. Of course, one tends not to look. But in this case, sitting in front of me, you could not escape the fact. You're going to see why I'm telling you. It's going to be very critical in a moment. The mother was astonishingly beautiful at 40. And that beauty was emphasized by the fact that her daughter wasn't. The daughter wanted to go to seminary. The daughter was obese. The daughter was plain, and that's being kind. But who cares? Unfortunately, in the world today, I have just recently been told that I've now made 52 shidduchim. And what in today's world, if you ask when you meet young men, and you want to inquire what they're looking for, the number one requirement they always start with: she has to look like, and it's not. And incidentally, it's not some broad stroke. She has to be that. No, it's exact. They know the height, the hair color, the complexion, the general shade. Some a little bit thin to and very thin or not so. Whole thing. I always think this is ridiculous because the 3 women that the Gemara talks about being the most beautiful in the world, and we've discussed this before, was Sora, Abigail, and then Esther. But there's a complaint in the Gemara. Esther wasn't beautiful. She was green. I've got a whole share on that subject. She wasn't really green. But basically, to which the Gemara says, okay, Vashti. So Vashti was either the 3rd or 4th most beautiful woman in history. But so if I was to supply, oh God, should I tell you this story? I don't know if I can even tell you the story during the 3 weeks. You're nodding. So basically, my wife and I, when we were living in New York, there was a young man who came to see us who had been married, divorced. I think he had 3 kids. He was originally from England, extremely charismatic, extremely talented, and very nice. And we were very impressed with him. And so he was looking to remarry. I'm going to get in such trouble. And this is being videoed. Oh, this is the end of my career. Anyway, so basically, I said to him, okay, I'm very happy to help you. Do you have a resume, CV you can send me, which he did the next day. And I had in my computer a whole list of girls that, young women actually, who were looking to marry. And so looking at his resume and thinking of the resume of one girl, I sent the resume off. Incidentally, it drives me nuts that resumes have the girl's or the boy's picture in it. A meeting's not a marriage. Go and meet the person for at least once. I always insist at least twice, by the way. And then, take it from there. Anyway, so basically, he sent me his resume. I read that, sent him the resume of this girl, and within literally 5 minutes came, no, not from me. And I thought that was pretty quick. Anyway, so later in the day, I thought somebody else sent another resume, and again, an immediate no. When this happened the 3rd time, I had my light bulb moment. I thought, oh yes, it's the attraction factor. So that he's rejecting the girls because of how they look. Now, I'm not going to comment on how he looked. And now, of course, being a man, women always know if other women are pretty, but I have no clue if a guy's handsome or not. I don't care. He shouldn't have cared anyway. But anyway, so I did something extraordinarily naughty. I did a Google search for the top 5 Hollywood actresses of today. You don't get to be a top 5 Hollywood actress unless you're extraordinarily beautiful. I think you know that. And I just chose one. It was perfectly kosher pictures, and it was so I just took the head, cropped the head, decapitated this woman. She had a weird name, can't remember the name. And I simply took one of my resumes, changed the names, town, and stuck her picture on it. And then I sent it to him. And immediately he said, no. And it was just hilarious. I mean, one of the most beautiful women in the world today, and she's not good enough for you? At that point, I gave up. He did actually marry somebody who was not a very beautiful woman, which is very, very strange. But young men today are looking for somebody who is extraordinarily beautiful. And there's a song that I seem to remember from, I think we discussed this once, from some show, Hollywood show, what do you call it? Broadway show in America. And the song was Some Enchanted Evening. And it goes like this. I'm not going to sing it to you, don't worry. Some enchanted evening, you may see a stranger across a crowded room. And somehow you know even then, no you don't! You complete moron! How could you possibly know what the woman is like? Oh, she's attractive, fine, she's attractive. But what's she like inside? She might be a Vashti. Right? Vashti was the third or fourth most beautiful woman in history, but she was Eva Braun. She was Hitler's wife. She was totally evil. And that's who you want to marry, and that's who you want to be the mother of your children? Anyway, this girl was plain, stunningly beautiful mother. And again, I mean, who cares what a person... Well, it's the person inside we are in. I know, looking around here, and we should be interested. Anyway, the mother was extremely keen for her daughter to fulfill her ambition, and the girl told me everything about herself, and I filled out the official forms, sent out the form, and she was accepted in Neve Shiurim, and she went to Neve Shiurim, and it lasted for 6 months, and it was utter and total disaster. She came back to England. She didn't get in touch, and I didn't know how to get in touch with her. And then I heard a rumour that she had now become a drug addict, and forgive me, a prostitute. Heartbreaking. Didn't know how to get hold of this girl. And then eventually, I think it was 2 years later, I got a phone call to say she was now in a hospital ward in Manchester, in South Manchester, after a failed suicide attempt. So I went down to the ward. This is an NHS, the socialised medicine they have. Big, long ward. I think it was like 10 beds on either side. And she was in the last bed. So I turned out, and she saw me. And she immediately hid underneath the covers. So I walked down, and I can't actually remember her name now. Let's call her Sarah. I said, Sarah, it's Rabbi Wawa. I come out from underneath the cover. She said, please go away. I said, take that silly sheet off your head. I know you're there. You know I'm here. She said, Rabbi Wawa, please just go away. I said, okay. I said, look, I'm going to take out my card. I'm going to leave it beside the bed. If you feel I can help you in any way, or you need any help, just let me know. The next day she phoned me. She phoned me to say that she was now in a psychiatric unit. She was being assessed to see if she was a further danger to herself. And so I went down to the psychiatric unit, which I have to tell you, in all of my tasks as a rabbi, is the thing I hate the worst. It's horrible. You walk in there and there's all these very sick people who want to tell you that you're Yoshki, or they're Yoshki, or they're both Yoshki, etc., which is not true in my case. Anyway, and there I found her. And then I got to hear her story. You see, when I told you the story at the beginning about, her being so keen to go to seminary and her mother being so keen, there was an alarm bell ringing somewhere in the back of my mind, but I couldn't exactly put my finger on what that alarm bell was until I heard her story. And that's why I come back to the fact that the mother was extremely beautiful. You see, this extremely beautiful mother, if she was stunningly beautiful as a 40-year-old, you can imagine as a 19-year-old, the true flowering of a woman's beauty around about that age, she must have been absolutely stunning. And that's when she got married. And 9 months later, she produced her first child. It was a little baby girl. It was this little baby girl. But unlike the mother, the baby girl was an ugly duckling. A year later, she got pregnant again, and 9 months later produced another daughter. But this time, the baby girl, like the mother, was stunning. In the mother's mind, she only had one daughter. If she went on vacation, she took the pretty girl with her, and the other was left behind with an aunt, with an uncle. When she went shopping in the mall for clothes, etc., she took her pretty daughter with her, and the plain daughter was left behind. It's almost like one of these, what do they call these children's story they tell? What do you call those horrible fairy tale story? A horrible fairy tale. And that was that. And that was the bell that was ringing at the back of my mind, the warning bell. You see, in all my years of working with either boys, potential Balichuva going to yeshiva, or girls going to seminary, no parent has ever wanted their child to go to such a place. In fact, they're desperately upset at the thought of them going to upset. They think that their child's going to be lost to them. That, incidentally, is a sincere concern, which people like me, we have to assure them and mean it, that will not happen. But she was terribly keen for her daughter to go to seminary. And that didn't make sense, but I was so busy to get her there, I didn't pick up on it. You see, she was keen for her daughter to go to seminary because she was keen for her daughter to go anywhere, as long as it was out of her life. Anyway, so I heard that story, I was very upset, said, I'll see you tomorrow, I'll come back tomorrow. I came back tomorrow, she was already out of the hospital, couldn't contact her, lost her again. A year later I was told she'd now joined a Christian cult in London. And this is the day before cell phones, long before cell phones. And so I managed somehow or other to find out the address and phone number of this cult in London. I phoned up, somebody answered the phone, and I said, can I speak to Sarah? And amazingly, they let me speak to her, because normally they keep evil people like me away from their brainwashed. And she came to the phone. I said, Sarah, it's Rabbi YY. She said, I know. I said, I'd like to come to London to speak to you. And she said, there's no point. I said, Sarah, let me come to London. She said, YY, I like you. And I know you like me. But you don't have the time that I need. But you don't have the time that I need. How much time do you think you would have to devote to repairing the damage to a broken life, which had been broken by the person should have cared most for it and cherished it most over a period of, I think it was 22 years. Another 22 years? 24/7? She was right. I didn't have that time. I have lots of people that are phoning me up with issues and problems and stuff. What do you do with somebody like that? What do you do when the damage is so profound and so terrible that how can you possibly put that thing back together again, that life back together again? So that's what this shiur is all about. I have to tell you, my wife and I were once saying a shiur in California, and it was San Jose, if anybody knows America. And we got off the plane, and there, as we were walking along the walkway, there was glass cabinets either side and in the middle between the two walkways. And it was a display from some university of something called Kintsukuroi. Kintsukuroi, anybody ever heard of Kintsukuroi? Kintsukuroi is the Japanese, Korean and Chinese philosophical concept that something which is broken and scarred looks more beautiful because it's been scarred. And if you break a pot, you don't throw it in the garbage, you simply put it back together again, but the cracks and the breakage points, they fix with a gold lacquer, a gold glue, with actual gold in it. So they look actually quite beautiful. There was all clay pots. Think about a red clay pot or a grey clay pot. They are pretty boring. It's a clay pot, just a functional tool. But ones that had been broken and had gold veins running through them looked astonishingly beautiful. And there was one pot, it clearly must have fallen from a very great height. It was shattered obviously into something like 100 pieces. And somebody had painstakingly put it all together again. And those gold scars running through that pot made it look truly spectacularly beautiful. Sometimes our beauty, to go back to beauty, is enhanced immeasurably by the fact we carry scars. But it's extraordinarily difficult for somebody who's gone through something like that girl, or maybe us in our own lives, go through terrible pain and terrible rejection or terrible abuse, etc., to overcome that and get back on track, and to realize that maybe those scars could make us somehow or other more beautiful than we would have been without them. So I asked you last week, which is the hardest? A relationship with Hashem or a relationship with other people? And everybody, of course, said other people, which will be next week's share. And that's going to be dealing with every day, dealing with other people, which can still, it needs technique, it needs expertise to overcome the inevitable hurts and little cuts that come along the way. This is about big cuts. When it comes to Hashem, well, he's prejudiced on our side. So here is the beautiful commentary in the Rambam in his Hilchos Tshuva by Rav Moshe Sternbuch Shlita of the Charedet Beistin here. And he says an interesting thing. I can't remember if I've ever shared this with you, but it's fabulous. This is in the first parak of Hilchos Tshuva, and it's Halacha Daled. And he says, I think we've shared this before, even though that regret, sincere regret, works for everything, and Yom Kippur itself, independent, or leaving aside tshuva, is a different thing that repairs damage. There are some averas which are immediately repairable, and some averas that take time to repair. So, for example, he says, suppose it's a mitzvah, a positive mitzvah that you're supposed to do, and you didn't do it. Let's say a man is obligated and obliged. That became obliged. No, okay. To put on tefillin. So it's a positive mitzvah, but he didn't do it. Right. So the next day he regrets the fact that he didn't do it. Then, fine. The teshuvah, his regret and determination never to do it again, that's it. The slate is wiped clean. Well done. But suppose it's not a positive mitzvah you failed to do. Suppose it's a negative mitzvah that you didn't fail to do. Right? You ate a pork sandwich. Are there pork sandwiches? Bacon sandwich. I think it's bacon sandwich. You eat a bacon sandwich, okay? So you regret and determination never to do it again. Wonderful, that works, but not completely. It's a bit like you put a dress or a shirt into the washing machine. There's a stain, and when it comes out, it's almost gone, but there's a little shadow of the stain still there. So what do? Put it in again for another wash. So the regret, the sincerity of the regret, that helps. That's get rid of most of the stain. The final wash is Yom Kippur. Those together, that completes the process. What if what you did was a biggie, a big don't do? The punishment for that would be Mrs. Basting. Then, if that's something you did, then you need regret, sincere regret, the usual tshuva thing. And you need Yom Kippur. And you need the suffering that comes to you in the course of your lifetime to complete the purging of that stain. But that, it's getting great, isn't it? This is very encouraging for all of us. But that is assuming that the thing that you did wrong did not involve a Chilul Hashem. Now, if what you did wrong involves a Chilul Hashem, you need sincere regret, and you need Yom Kippur, and you need suffering. And then, ladies and gentlemen, death! Oh, woo! It's death, yes, and then your sins will be wiped clean. Well, how encouraging is that? They don't teach this to Esha Torah or Sameach, but come and become frum, and one day you'll die, and that might get you to heaven. That's not very, very encouraging. So Rav Moshe Sternbuch says, I'll read the words. Just if you think I'm making this into Purim thing, it's not quite what Rav Sternbuch says, but listen. Rambam kan noila oid hadelis lebali tshuva. The Rambam in these words is slamming the door in the face of Bali Tshuva. That's Moshe Sternbuch's words. She'im ober b'chayev krisis l'oilo mo'ez kapra el b'surim b'mokam b'chil Hashem. Because you're saying that if you did something so bad that it's got to take a lifetime of pain and suffering, or death if it's a Chilul Hashem, well, what's the point? Yeah, it would just discourage anybody from trying. So he says, well, I've got good news for you. Even though the Rambam is basing himself on a Gemara, there is a posuk in Tehillim, it's Nun Aleph. Alamda poshoim darchecho v'chatoim elecho yeshuva. After Hashem forgave David the Melech for his Chilul Hashem in inverted commas. There's a lot to talk about that. But this famous story of Bathsheba, which even today in the non-Jewish world is still used as an accusation, he was forgiven, and Hashem says, I will teach people how you went about this, so they can learn from you. There is a way out of this. And then he quotes Rabbeinu Yonah, Rabbeinu Yonah's famous sefer, Tshuva, the handbook on how to do tshuva. famously says that you eradicate a Chilul Hashem, can you guess how? With a Kiddush Hashem. If you did a life, incidentally, Rabbeinu Yonah wrote Shari Tshuva as his kapora for having been a misnagid, having been an opponent of the Rambam. He wrote a whole book. His apology was not good enough. Going to the man's graveside and falling there and begging his forgiveness in heaven, that's not good enough. He wrote a whole book that would encourage a whole, generations, millennia of people to get Tshuva right. So if a person does something, even the worst thing, Hashem is on your side. And if we had lots and lots of time, I'll give you even more examples, even more extreme examples of the length that Hashem is going to go in order to save you if you've done something which seems unforgivable. That's because we're talking about you and Hashem. But what about human beings? How could that mother that I told you about, the beauty queen with the daughter, how could she ever get her to forgive her? Is it forgivable? The title of the Shiur is Forgiving the Unforgivable. There are things that you can do, you should know, I mean this is obvious, there are things that you can do to somebody which are simply unforgivable. And that is what I'd like to go into now. Here is another Rambam. The Rambam is the second perik of Hilchos Teshuvah, and it's Halacha Tes. So listen to this. Now, you're not going to like this. At least I hope you're not going to like this. Ein ha-teshuvah v'lo yikubur mechaprem ela al averes shebein odam l'mokem. All the process of teshuvah that we all know about and we've all discussed, that only helps with things you've done wrong between you and God. However, for example, misha ochel dover osa, you ate something that was treif, like my bacon sandwich, or baal bilas asur, or you engage in an illicit sexual affair. Adultery, that sort of thing, that seems to be forgivable. Okay. But sins that are between fellow human beings, fellow Jews, you smack somebody, you curse somebody, not just swearing, but cursing as in you should have a terrible life and stuff. Or you steal money from them, mug them and steal the money. That's never forgiven. You know that terribly anti-Semitic, a BBC producer I used to work with called John Forrest in my life, a very religious Christian. He said, when people ask Jews, can you forgive Hitler or the Nazis for what they did? He says, that's an anti-Semitic question. They're trying to make us, the victims, into the perpetrators because we can't forgive them. Well, of course we can't forgive them. I can't forgive in behalf of you. Somebody comes to me and said, somebody punched Sarah in the nose. Can you forgive me? It wasn't my nose. You'd have to ask Sarah and her nose whether they can forgive you. I can't forgive you. So it's a stupid thing as that. If you have hurt somebody else, then it's never forgiven. Unless you pay back. This is the bit that people forget about. Making right what you've done wrong. Suppose last week in the Shiur, somebody sitting next to me, you happen to be the victim, your purse is there, and let's say there was a $100 note there, and I was really pushed for cash, strapped for cash, and I couldn't resist it, and I stole $100. And then and you say, oh, my $100 going, and everybody's saying, where? They're looking under the table, and I go away. And then I'm smitten by remorse, and I phone you up, and I say, I'm so sorry, it was me, but the cost of moving here was so terrible. And we had to pay the kaplan and the mover who stole our money anyway. And I couldn't resist it. And I'm sorry, it was me. And you say, look, Robert Rimstein, everybody has a moment of weakness, and I'm sure you're a nice person, really, deep down. And just give me back the $100 and everything's forgiven. Oh, I don't want to give you back the $100. I just want you to forgive me. That doesn't work. You've got to put right as much as you can what you did wrong. So he says, you've got to give back there, and also to get them to forgive you. Right? I've given you it back. Are you sure you forgive me, etc., etc. Even though you give back the money that you stole, you can check your purse afterwards. You still have to. Right? You made it right. the money's back where it should be, you still got to get forgiveness. Interesting words. Even if you haven't hurt somebody except with words. What was that phrase in English? Sticks and stones will break my bones, but words will never hurt me. What nonsense. Words can be the most vicious things of all. You've got to go and beg and beg and beg for forgiveness. I think you know what's coming next. If your friend doesn't want to forgive you, so you find 3 friends of this person, and you come with their 3 friends to make it quite how much you mean it. You're saying it in public, in front of people, right? You're her friends. Look, I'm asking for her forgiveness. And then Pogaba, and you try again. And if she, I'm going to stop making you'll see why in a second, so make it George now. George, who has sneaked into this lady's Shiur, he's over here. If George doesn't, after 3 times, forgive, then you're done. That's it, you've done everything expected of you. And the person who didn't forgive, the sin becomes theirs. How do you feel about that? So I used to teach in a girls' seminary in Manchester called Manchester Old Seminary. It had a Hebrew name, but nobody ever used it, and I can't remember it. I taught there for about 10 years, so something wrong there. Anyway, so basically, sadly no longer exists. There was a girl that we had a lot of girls latterly who came from very troubled backgrounds, mostly Borough Park in Brooklyn, New York. And there's one girl who came to the seminary, and her story was that this poor girl had, along with all of her siblings, and the mother must have been very disturbed, but the mother used to lock her 4 or 5 little kids out on the fire escape in their pajamas all night. Now, any New Yorkers or ex-New Yorkers like myself will know, I mean, you literally can get frostbite. Literally get frostbite in New York. It's that bad. Anyway, this is found out. Social services swooped in, and the children were taken away and brought up, I think, by aunts and uncles and cousins and stuff. And that was the story. When the girl became a Kala, that was in our time, she was sitting there, in her Kala chair, all decked like a throne, decked in white, etc. And a do-gooder, and I don't mean that pejoratively, but somebody was trying to do good, knew that the mother was there, whom she hadn't seen for, I think, 14, 15 years, something like that, and whispered in her ear, your mother's here, can she sit beside you? Which, of course, would be a normal thing. So the girl thought for a second and said yes. And so there came the mother, sheepishly through the crowd, and smiled weakly and sat beside her daughter, and the daughter smiled and looked away. And the girl lasted for about 20 seconds. And then tears started to pour down her cheeks, and she started to shake, and they had to take the mother away. Does that mean to say, therefore, that this girl who suffered terrible physical abuse at the hands of the mother, in not being able to forgive the mother, she's the bad girl now? She's the bad one? No. So I first saw this Rambam, and it didn't make any sense to me. And that's because, and I asked my Rav, the Gates Rav, if what I thought was the solution is correct, and he said yes. What does the next halacha say? Oser la'odom liyos achzori. It is forbidden for a Jew to be cruel. V'lo yispayas el, and refuse to allow yourself to be mollified, pacified. Ruig is the Yiddish word. Liet says that kosher likas, our nature is that we should be easy to forgive, hard to lose our temper. And if somebody sincerely asks for your forgiveness, you should sincerely forgive. Now this is critical. What I thought the Rambam was saying, and what the Gates of Rov, Rabbi Rakov Zechazal Livrocha, confirmed is, when is it that if you refuse to forgive, even after 3 times, when somebody is asking you forgiveness, that if you refuse those 3 times, the sin becomes yours? It's when you're refusing to forgive out of cruelty. You want me to forgive you? Burn in hell!
If that's your motivation, if that's your intention, that's when the sin becomes yours. But if you can't forgive, like this girl who tried but just couldn't forgive because the abuse, the offense was so deep, the scar was so profound that it wasn't within her, then of course you've done nothing wrong. Of course you're not guilty. And of course you're not in trouble in the slightest. There are things you can do to another human being that are unforgivable. Not out of cruelty, not out of intention, but I just don't have it within me to forgive. Now, I'm going to pause for a second. I told you this is a difficult shiur. It's a difficult shiur because inevitably this is talking to somebody. This is a small group, and I'm really hoping it doesn't talk to anybody here. But if it's not talking to you personally, it's going to be talking to somebody you know. And almost always, when I'm speaking to a large shiur, there's at least 2 women sitting there crying. Because all of us have had, every human being on planet Earth, you're going to have hurts and pains, little worries, little hurts along the way. But probably we've all had big hurts as well. And been often betrayed by the people who should, like the first story, who have been looking after us well. I have to tell you as a rabbi, it's extraordinarily common that the people you've helped the most are the people who hate you the most. Mm-hmm. Because, in fact, I think that's why the Rambam famously says that if you're helping somebody, the best way to help somebody in trouble is to make them think that they've helped themselves. Set somebody up in business. If you can do that so that they feel good about themselves, they won't come to hate you. If you can't set somebody up in business, the best way to do it is to give money to help people who need help so that you don't know who you're giving to and they don't know who they're getting from. Then, if I remember rightly, it's you know but they don't know. And it's all to protect you. Because, you see, when you come to, and this has happened so many times, when you come to somebody for help and you're desperate, you're a bit like when you're a tiny little baby, newborn baby girl or a newborn baby boy, naked on the carpet, on the floor, utterly unable to help yourself in any way whatsoever. And when they see you, and they remember that you saw them like that, and you were the guy that helped, then you are the constant reminder of that horrible time when they were that naked baby on the floor. And consequently, a bit like Pavlov's dogs, you are the trigger for hatred, almost as though you put them there in the first place. The Chasam Sofer, often when couples used to come to see him because they were in trouble for whatever, he had a little dish on his desk of pebbles. It wasn't decoration. He would say to them, "Yes, I'll help you, but could you take one of those pebbles and throw it at me?" What? Could you take one of those little stones and throw it at me? They look at each other completely baffled. I'd rather you threw the stones at me now before I've helped you than afterwards when I've helped you. And I found that sometimes the people I've helped the most hate me most profoundly. And for that very reason. When I know I've done nothing wrong except try to help. So we all will get hurt a lot in our lives. But sometimes it can be literally unforgivable. But here we go. Here's the difficult one. I want to tell you that even if you can't forgive, if something like that has happened to you and you do find it unforgivable, you should want to forgive. Because more than you ever give to the person by forgiving them, you give to yourself by forgiving them. I remember when I was the campus rabbi for the 14 universities in the northwest of England, I went to a student conference, something called UJS, the Union of Jewish Students. And of course this was, when was this, the 80s, 90s? Feminism was a big thing. And I remember there was a group of about 10 or 15 young women, shaved hair, Doc Marten boots. Do you get the sort of lifestyle that we're talking about here? And they were full of all the propaganda of their movement. And I get into, I think the phrase today is into a debate with one of these young women. Now you have to realize that I was completely the personification of evil. I was A man, B, an Orthodox Jew, and a rabbi. I mean, didn't get worse than this. And if I remember rightly, it was a long time ago, and of course, with memory, details might be a bit sketchy. But I think it was, we were arguing till about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. And at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, I think I'd managed to establish my credentials as just being another Jew concerned about the pain of this young lady. It was that time that she told me, in actual fact, she'd been sexually abused by her uncle as a little girl, repeatedly. So I said to her, look, honestly, I cannot conceive of anything happening to any little girl as bad as happened to you, but you realise, in not being able to let go of it, you're allowing him to rape you every single day of your life. Because if you can't let go of the past becomes the present. The pain of the past is the pain of the present. You're just hurting yourself all the time. I remember I used to appear regularly in BBC television that Takufa of my life. And there was a show which was called the Heaven and the Earth Show. It's supposed to be in sort of religious things, religious topics. It's very sort of like jazzy and cool. And they had me on to debate the subject of forgiveness. It was me and another lady. And this lady wasn't Jewish. This lady's sister had been kidnapped and murdered by a husband and wife team called Fred and Rosemary West. Those who are English might remember this. It's a very horrible memory. But this husband and wife team were discovered to have killed, kidnapped, tortured. I mean, think of Hamas. Young woman, over 100 and something young women. He was in construction. They found in his big house, buried in the basement, 30 bodies. And this woman's sister was one of the victims. There is an organisation in the United States, I can't remember the name of it, she mentioned at the time, which deals and tries to help those whose close family members, that's parents, siblings, children, have been murdered. And of course, in America, murder is a growth industry. And so at these annual conferences, all these victims, extended victims, families can go, and there's self-help groups, Alcoholics Anonymous sitting in the circle, etc. There are psychologists and psychiatrists and priests and ministers, everything you could possibly want. And she'd gone the first year, but nothing had helped. And then she went again the second year, and nothing helped. She'd just come back from her third conference. And somebody said something at that conference which literally and totally changed her life. Somebody said, forgiveness means giving up the hope of a better past. It was brilliant. Forgiveness means giving up the hope of a better past. Because you see, if you don't give up that hope, don't you live and play the whole thing over in your mind again and again and again, in a loop, again and again, every single day? The past becomes the present. Whatever happened to you then is happening again to you now. The wound never ever closes. Forgiveness means giving up the hope of a better past. I thought it was genius, so I incorporated it into my Shiurim, as you can hear. I have a very, very close friend called Rabbi Dr. Jonathan Dove. He's South African, and we're very close buddies. And he like me was a campus rabbi, and then became a psychologist and clinical psychologist and stuff like that. And I told him this, and he phoned me back a month later, and he says, "Why?" He calls me "Why?" I prefer Your Holiness, but he calls me "Why?" He says, "I want you to know that I've been dealing with over 20. His clientele are all from. He says, I've been dealing with, if I remember rightly, he said 20 cases for over 2 years with very, very little success. Until I told them your magic words. And remember, they weren't mine, it was this lady's. Forgiveness means giving up the hope of a better past. And all 20 have started to move on. So I would say to you that even if this applies to you, or somebody you know, you should tell them that even though you can't find a way to forgive, there may be a way to forgive. And you're not doing it for them, you're doing it for you. But as soon as you are able to let go of that pain, then you start to heal. Wounds never close unless they are pushed together. You start the process of closing. But if you keep a slash, a cut in flesh open, in fact it becomes infected, it can become worse, and it can kill you. So if you can find somebody, or if you know somebody who's gone through terrible things like that, tell them more than you ever give to the person, you're going to give to yourself. Otherwise, the past becomes the present. And if you can't see a way to do this, there was back to Broadway and film, which, looking around here, the level of holiness is palpable. But there was a film called Fiddler on the Roof, which I know nobody here has ever heard of. So let me explain this to you. Right? So I was 9 when I saw this on TV. My parents had TV, and there's a song in it called "If I Was a Rich Man," doidy 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 doidy. And in this, he says a very interesting thing. He says, and if I was a rich man, I would blah blah blah, and people would come and ask me advice all day long. It was I think what we have done as a people better than anybody else is asked advice all day long. Even in Pirkei Avos, it talks about various stages of a man's life or a person's life, and it gets to a certain stage when you are appropriate for Eitzah, 40 for wisdom, I think it's 50 for Eitzah, and give advice. You have enough life experience to be able to give advice. And if you can't see a way forward, and it's interesting in that song, people would come and ask me for advice all day long. I think what Klal Yisrael have done brilliantly, long before it became a multi-trillion-dollar industry with psychologists and psychiatrists and life coaches, not sure what they are, but fine, and they're doing better than the psychologists because they charge less, etc., etc. It's good to share, as Shlomo HaMelech says. We've been very good at asking for advice, and because we're members of Klal Yisrael, you'll always find somebody who'll give you advice. Look, when I moved to America, and my 15 years in New York, I used to hear people talking about that they're going, this time of year, they're going to the mountains. Now, when they say the mountains, they of course mean the Catskills. Now, we've got some New Yorkers here, so but please don't be offended, but the Catskills are not mountains. I am Scottish. I can assure you that the Catskills are not mountains. The Catskills are pimples. I don't know what you're wearing on your feet now, or if you've just come out from a chasna, maybe, I don't know, mid-heel, high heels, whatever's in between, so, but that'll do to get to the top of a Catskill, because they're not really challenging. But if you want to get to the top of a Scottish mountain, then you need proper hiking boots. These are big mountains with wonderful names. And if you want to get to the top of a Swiss mountain, like the Matterhorn, you need serious professional gear. But if you want to get to the top of the highest mountain in the world, which of course is called Everest, then in order to get there, you need a team of support, a support team. And they've got a wonderful name. Go on, Linda. Sherpas. Sherpas. I like that name. It's almost identical to the Yiddish word schleppers. And that's precisely what they do. They schlep all your stuff. There's 50 in a group. The first 10 make a base camp. And then 40 schlep up to the next Madrega with you. And they make another camp, and 30 go to the next, they stay there. And then 30 go to the next. And then 10 go, and then eventually it's 10, the Nebos, who go to the top with you, right? And that's you at the top of Mount Everest. The bigger and higher the mountain you have to climb, the more help you need to get to the top. And down, as it were, the other side. You will come, and if not you will come across people who've gone, that have got mountains standing in their way. It might be their mother locked them out in a fire escape, or their mother rejected them because they weren't pretty and gorgeous like they were, or a million other horrible stories that we hear about, and our hearts just fall. But there is a way to get over that mountain, and it might not be alone. In fact, the worst possible thing you can ever try and do, ask any mountain climber, is climb alone. I'm not a mountain climber, I'm a scuba diver. Suicide is diving alone. You almost always dive with a buddy. You must never dive alone. If you get in trouble, don't you know that this thing that comes out the back, there's 2 of them. There's a spare in case something's wrong with your friends, you can breathe from yours as well and you get to the top. That you always have to have somebody on your side, and the bigger the problem, the more people on your side. What's that book by that great Tzedekis, Hillary Clinton? It takes a village, an African phrase, to raise a child, but every village is a chief. You need somebody who's really at the top, somebody at the top of their game, who's able to help you to realize that even the unforgivable, with real good help, can be forgivable, allow you to heal, and allow you to move on. Okay. Any questions? I think we have time for a question. This usually provokes questions, yes.
So, my personal feeling, I don't know if this is accurate, is that a lot of issues are allowing yourself to forgive someone is what we think forgiveness means, how you define forgiveness, and a lot of people, I think, have the impression that forgiveness means that once you forgive, you saying what you did was okay, but you can forgive without saying that, it's not a stamp of that what you did was all right.
That's a very important point. There's an organization called Al-Anon, which supports the families of alcoholics, Alcoholics Anonymous and Al-Anon. And somebody told me once, there was a lady and she was a member of Al-Anon. There's a phrase they have: how do you know if an alcoholic is lying? Are his lips moving? Right. It's easy enough to say sorry. The question is, does the person mean it? I do not think, and this incidentally, that TV program, when this lady said that thing, I jumped in and I was really, as I said, it's brilliant, but I said, but you should not forgive somebody who doesn't want forgiveness. If somebody's not asking for forgiveness, we're talking about somebody is sorry and is begging you for forgiveness. But if somebody is not, then in forgiving them, and all the Christian, there's 12 million people watching the show, there's emails coming in, I think the rabbi's cruel, and Jesus said, give a puff what Jesus says. Moses doesn't. Jesus saves and Moses invests. So basically, you've got to make sure the person wants to say sorry and means it, and is going to take active steps to make sure that he doesn't do it again. If not, if you forgive them without those guarantees or that at least belief of their sincerity, you're simply encouraging them to go and do it to somebody else, and that you're not allowed to do. Yes.
I'm very confused. If somebody doesn't realize that they hurt you, but you know that what they did was very wrong, or they hurt your child,
right,
and you're feeling it, and they don't come to you Erev Yom Kippur,
right,
or they don't come to your child. On Yom Kippur, are you supposed to say, Kadosh Baruch Hu, I forgive them in my heart?
This is a biggie. It really depends on your madrega. Big tzaddikim, real tzaddikim, forgive people even if they haven't. But I think if you're just at a very low spiritual level like me, I think it would be very appropriate for it to be sure that they actually are sorry. And of course, you allude to another very important point, the Easter of Sinas Chinam, which is the focus of the time that we're in. The Pasuk says, don't hate your brother in your heart. Right? What does it mean, don't hate him in your heart? You see, if I let you know that you've hurt me, there are three possibilities. One, you say you haven't asked for an apology, but I'm obliged to come and tell you I have a problem with you. I have a taina against you. And there's three possible outcomes. So I think you hurt my feelings because I think you did A. Incidentally, let me give you a serious piece of advice. Always say, it seems to me. I think you did. Don't say you did. Because as you're going to see in a second, it might blow up in your face. It might be that the person turns around and says, you know what? I didn't do that at all. How many times? And that's why the mitzvah of Don Lachaskus is such a rewarding mitzvah, because if you do it, if you give somebody the benefit of the doubt, that's the rough translation, and you find out that in actual fact they didn't do it, you feel good about yourself. You didn't condemn them, or at least you offered it. And so many times, what the story seems to you to be, and it could have no alternative narrative, when you challenge the person and say, that's not what happened at all. I did invite you to the party. I just thought you didn't turn up. Ask Sarah. I asked Sarah to ask you because I remember my husband had to go to hospital. I was busy with that. I said, remember to ask Rachel. And then you go, and that's what you did ask. So you might have a problem with somebody. Turns out it's actually not true. Number one. Number two is that she might indeed have hurt you. But then she says to you, you're 100% right, and I did do it, and I've been so ashamed of myself. I've just not been able to come and look you in the face. I've disgraced myself, and I'm so sorry. And that's happened to me many times, and it probably happened to you as well. So it's very nice that somebody can come and say, I did this, and I'm sorry, and at 3 o'clock this is what I did. And some people just can't do it. They're ashamed of themselves, they regret it, but they can't put that into words. And then when they say that, that to me is an apology. And it might be, they say, yeah, I did it. And I can hardly wait to do it again, because I hate your guts. Right? Now, if that is their reaction, then that's not called Sina Skinum. Sina Skinum is hating somebody for no reason. If somebody gives you a very good reason to hate you, for you to hate them rather, and they want to do it again, then don't be an idiot and forgive them. Because all you're going to do is encourage them to do it again to you. So I think it's a big issue you're talking about. Each case, look, Baruch Hashem, I just mentioned the fact, ask somebody who can get to the top of the mountain. And I keep saying in this share, if you want to succeed as a Jew, do what it says in Pirkei Avos, Asalach Rav. Get yourself a rabbi, or as your woman, get yourself a rebbe, somebody you can go and say, is this the right approach? Should I do this? Shouldn't I? I'm having a silly little problem at the moment. There is a guy in our show. I was counting this morning. There's about 30 people come to our show collecting every morning. And so it's a shekel, unless, it's one guy I give 3. And there's one guy, and he looks very geschicked. He never looks at you, or doesn't say thank you, just puts out his hand and walks away. And I saw him coming out of Greens about 2 months ago. And I thought, Greens is expensive. I don't shop too often in Greens. Right? All right. And I thought to myself, let's be done like Huskers. If I was like that and I was reduced to going around asking people for help and money, maybe I'd need a treat now and then. Right? Maybe a treat. Yeah. Don Huskers. And 3 days ago I was having the very earliest minion in the Gra, and there he was. And he was taking out his talis and tefillin from his talis and tefillin bag. All silver, real silver, embroidered in and stuff like that. I thought, hold on a minute. Is this so? And it's annoying me. And I'm annoyed from being annoyed. It's a big deal. Give him a shekel. Right? Nebuch, he's not working. Nebuch, he doesn't want to. He's obviously making more money than you are. So fair enough. It's a big deal. It's nothing to worry about. But it's still annoying me a little bit, because if you give money to somebody and it's not legitimate tzedakah, you've not given tzedakah. That's the halacha. So if you have to give X amount of dollars or pounds or whatever, and you give X, and 10 of that is to this guy, assuming this guy isn't legit, then you are short of £10 that month or dollars that you should have given. And when you get upstairs, you say, well, I gave it. I've got my list. I gave this. I've set aside $10,000 because I earn $100,000 every month, like Y.Y. Rubenstein, and I gave it. No, you didn't, because you gave it to this person. So how do you get? Is it a legitimate hashkafa? Do you just ignore it? You need, even for little things, you need somebody who knows what they're talking about. And I don't, or rather, I'm too emotionally involved in this one. Always get advice. There are people who can get you to the top of the mountain and over these sorts of issues and over the unforgivable, so that you help yourself and you get, for the first time, some relief from pain that might have been with you for a lifetime. Oh, and I'm going to switch this off because